What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 5 reasons to buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So to start off, my first reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE is the materials. Now, of course, being the successor to the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, just like that phone, the S23 FE is essentially an entry-level flagship phone, giving us the performance, camera quality, and general features of a much higher-end device, while still being relatively affordable. But when it came to the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, really my main complaint with that phone was, despite definitely being a much higher-end device that does still give us a lot of value for the money, it really just didn't feel like it. I mean, back when it was first released, the S21 FE was going for around $700 or $800, depending on the version you got. But it still had a plastic back, not a ton of weight to it, and in general, sure, it didn't feel bad or anything, but for a high-end device that was honestly a bit more on the expensive side, it really just didn't feel nearly as premium. But with the S23 FE, we're really not getting that issue. First of all, this phone does have a really good amount of weight to it, so when you're holding it, not only is it definitely not going to feel cheap, but it is going to feel quite a bit more premium. To add to this, just like with the S21 FE, we are getting a nice aluminum frame here, which not only is going to make the phone feel a bit more premium, but it's also a lot more durable than plastic, so definitely great there. And on the back, instead of plastic like the S21 FE, the back of this phone is made of Corning Gorilla Glass 5, so definitely quite an upgrade, I would say. So this is good for 2 different reasons. First of all, having nicer materials is, in general, just going to make the phone feel better. I mean, this phone is not quite as expensive as the S21 FE was, going for around $600 factory unlocked. So yeah, it's definitely still affordable, but still, compared to your average mid-range phone like the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G, for example, it is still quite a bit more expensive. So I feel like when you're spending this kind of money on a phone, chances are you will want the materials to be at least a bit more premium. So that's definitely a good thing. And then aside from aesthetics and the overall premium feel, compared to a lower end phone that's typically going to be made entirely of plastic, again, this phone is going to be a bit more durable. And while if you are going to be using it a lot, going places and stuff, I still personally recommend getting a case. Having a more durable design, of course, is always going to help. Now, my second reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE is the processor. Now, for an entry-level flagship phone, I mean, an entry-level flagship phone is still a flagship phone. I'm sure most people are expecting it to be pretty fast anyway, but with the S23 FE, this phone is actually quite a bit faster than I expected. Now, with this device, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor. So this is a brand new processor, and while on one hand, I've really only had this phone for like a couple weeks, so I haven't really done a ton with it yet, but in my experience so far, I have found this to be a really fast device. In fact, to put this into perspective, my personal phone is an iPhone 13, and honestly, when it comes to performance, I don't really see a whole lot of a difference between this phone and my iPhone. So yeah, definitely real high-end performance here. So if you are someone who's going to be on your phone a lot, especially doing more demanding activities like high-performance mobile gaming, for example, and you're really in a situation where performance is one of the more important factors for you, for that kind of use, the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE could definitely be the phone for you. Now, I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current device, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this phone stands performance-wise compared to your current device. But in general, I feel like for most people, it will probably be a pretty solid upgrade, and honestly, even if it's not, when you get to this level, it's honestly at the point where the difference between one phone and another, it's not going to matter quite as much. I mean, sure, it's not exactly the fastest phone there is. Something like the S23 Ultra or the iPhone 15 Pro Max or the S24 Ultra when it inevitably comes out. Those phones are, I'm just assuming, going to be faster than this. But still at the same time, I mean, for the average user, you're probably really not going to notice it. And even if you are on your phone a bit more doing stuff like mobile gaming, at this level of performance, the difference between this phone and a slightly faster phone is really only going to be marginal. So in general, if you are looking for a really fast phone, but you don't really want to spend $1,000 on the highest end phone there is, then I do think the S23 FE will be a great choice. Now my third reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE is the camera. Now with this phone we are getting a really nice camera here, and while if you're familiar with the S21 FE, this is probably not going to be a surprise, but even compared to the predecessor, that was already really good to begin with. The camera we get with this phone is actually even better. So with the S23 FE, up front, we got a real nice looking 10 megapixel selfie camera, and if you're coming from like a mid-range phone or even the S21 FE, don't let the megapixels fool you. The selfie camera here is actually really good. The photos it takes are great, so if you are someone who takes a lot of selfies or maybe records a lot of selfie videos, maybe you're a content creator for example, for that kind of use, keep in mind the camera we're getting here is great, and I really don't think you'll be disappointed. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup, with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. So on one hand with this phone, when it comes to the overall features, it's pretty similar to its predecessor, but with a 50 megapixel camera, I don't know if you remember, but with the S21 FE, we were only getting like 13 megapixels. And while again the megapixel count definitely isn't everything, since these phones do have pretty similar hardware, I would say with a 50 megapixel main camera, the S23 FE did get a significant upgrade. In addition to this, for video, this phone can now record 8K videos at 24 frames per second in the rear camera, and then 4K at 60 in both the rear and front cameras. So not only are we getting plenty of camera features here, and a higher quality main camera in general, but we're also getting really good video capabilities. So again, if you're maybe like a content creator for example, or really just someone who likes to take a lot of pictures and record a lot of videos, then this phone will definitely be a great choice for you. Now to give you a quick idea of what this camera can do, here's a few pictures taken with the S23 FE. And again, I do think the photo quality here is great. So no matter what you're taking photos for, whether it's for more casual purposes like sending photos to friends and family using something a bit less impactful like Snapchat for example, or if you're really posting a lot of pictures on social media like Instagram, or maybe recording YouTube videos, something like that, the list really goes on. No matter what, if the camera is really a big part of what you're doing with your phone on a daily basis, then I do think the S23 FE will be a great choice. Now my fourth reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE is the extra features you're getting with a higher end device. Now this may or may not be that useful for some people, it really just depends on how you're actually using your phone. But with the S23 FE, and really any phone at this level, compared to your average mid-range phone, we are getting several things here that you're not typically going to find in a lower end device. First of all, keep in mind, this phone does have wireless charging, so if you are looking for that feature, definitely keep this in mind. And in my experience, the wireless charging on this phone is actually pretty good. So while the S21 FE and honestly pretty much every phone at this level is going to be pretty much the same, it is still a feature I'm glad to see. Now, in case you're wondering what wireless charging is really used for, aside from the convenience factor and it honestly just being kind of cool, it's also a nice precaution for maybe your charging port breaks. In that kind of situation, if it's a phone that doesn't have wireless charging, then of course you're gonna have to pay to fix it or even just get a new phone. But with this phone, or really any phone that has wireless charging, if something happens to the USB-C port, you can still charge the phone just fine. Now, I've actually started to live this with my iPhone 13 because the charging port is getting a little dirty, and I know you can clean it out pretty easily with like a toothpick or something, but I keep forgetting and I don't really have random toothpicks lying around. So with my iPhone, even though the charging port is honestly getting a little bit harder to use, I don't really care, I don't even notice because I pretty much just put it on a wireless charger anyway. So yeah, definitely a nice feature to have in a phone. And aside from that, maybe you're like traveling or something. In that kind of situation, you might not always be around a charger, and sure, you can always get an external battery pack that has a wire, but I feel like everyone can agree that carrying around something that you have to plug in inside your pocket is kind of annoying. And since this phone has wireless charging, you can get something like this and it goes on so much easier. So yeah, wireless charging definitely has a lot of different uses. In addition to wireless charging, the S23 FE also has NFC, which I don't necessarily consider this a high-end feature because honestly pretty much every phone nowadays has it, or at least that's how I feel like it should be. But just keep in mind, if you do like to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry about that with this phone. And another thing this phone has that you're really not going to find in very many phones nowadays is Samsung DeX. Now, in case you don't know what it is, Samsung DeX basically allows you to plug your phone into a computer monitor and kind of basically use it as a mini computer, which in this day and age, since smartphones are basically mini computers already, it really just kind of makes sense. Now, depending on what you're doing, you might not ever even notice this feature or remember it's there after watching this video, but at the same time, I do think it's a real nice thing to have, and when it comes to lower end or mid-range phones, I don't think any of them have that. So if you are looking for a phone that does have Samsung DeX, maybe your current phone is like an older flagship phone or something, and you're already used to using it, then keep in mind, the S23 FE does have it too. And then finally, my fifth reason why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE is the display. Now, I feel like for most people nowadays, this is definitely an important one because most of us are doing stuff like watching videos, for example, or using social media, and if nothing else, just simply browsing the web. And really, no matter what you're doing with your phone, having a great display is never a bad thing. So with the S23 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED 2X display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 403, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. So definitely a great display here. On one hand, compared to something like the S23 Ultra or really any giant phone you can think of, it's not really the biggest. But at the same time, I feel like nowadays phones are just getting so huge that sometimes seeing a phone that's like 6.4 inches might not seem that impressive, but I will say when you're actually using it, it does feel large enough for pretty much anything. So I really have no complaints here. With a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, it's not quite as tall and narrow as a 20:9 aspect ratio that we're typically seeing on phones these days. But at the same time, I mean, I haven't had any problems with it. It's still nice and tall and narrow, so if you're doing your scrolling through a web page or a social media feed, things are still gonna fit on the screen just fine without having to scroll constantly. And in landscape mode, we're gonna get a nice cinematic look here. So definitely good, definitely a real nice immersive experience for stuff like playing games and watching videos. And aside from the size and dimensions, the image quality of course is really good too. With a dynamic AMOLED 2X display, at this point I feel like they have like a million different types of AMOLED displays, but essentially, compared to the typical IPS LCD you might find in a lower end device, an AMOLED type display tends to be a bit brighter, the colors are a bit more rich and vibrant, and the viewing angles are really good too. So if you're maybe outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, compared to something like an IPS LCD, a display like this will be a lot easier to see. And with a 1080p resolution, of course, we're getting a nice, sharp, crisp image. So in general, if you're doing a lot of content consumption or really anything where the image quality is a bit more important, then this phone will be a great choice for you. But those were my 5 reasons why you should buy the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE. Now, in general, this phone does have a few drawbacks, which I will be going over in a separate video. But if you're looking for a device that really has the feel, performance, and overall features of a much higher end phone, but you don't want to spend like $1,400 on an S23 Ultra, then I do think for what it is, the S23 FE is really a great alternative. Now once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.